I am persuaded, Your Majesty, that England must move forward to a more enlightened form of government, based upon a true representation of a free people. Such an institution is known as democracy, sir.
Democracy, Mr.
Cromwell, sir.
Democracy, Mr. Cromwell, was a Greek drollery based on the foolish notion that there are extraordinary possibilities in very ordinary people.
Further, as you can see, citizens, classic Athenian democracy was understood as rule by the mob. Violent, irrational, and ultimately destructive. Democracy is a term that has suffered from overuse and misuse, as George Orwell remarked. The word has come to be little more than a synonym for good government, with no regard for its origin in Greek political theory. A perusal of a standard English dictionary reveals no less than 4 distinct modern meanings: representative democracy, liberal or constitutional democracy, social or economic democracy, and finally, direct democracy. Until modern times, direct democracy was the only meaning, a form of government in which the sovereign power is exercised directly by the whole body of citizens, acting under procedures of majority rule. The definition is uncompromising. 51% of the population of citizens has absolute power over the other 49. Direct democracy is technically a way of describing a natural form of social organization that exists among relatively small groups of equals, such as exists in tribes, clans, fraternities. In Western society, the most important and influential experiment in direct democracy was that of ancient Athens, which not only invented the term democracy, but set out to create a comprehensive system of direct popular rule. In theory and in practice, the Athenian constitution is also significant in being the first known experiment of direct democracy in a post-tribal social organization. From all accounts, Athens had a fully developed democracy by the second half of the 5th century BC, meaning that the class of citizens exercised direct popular control over all branches of government. Pericles was born of aristocratic blood, but championed the rights of the people. Under his persuasive leadership, the principles of direct democracy came fully into their own. Democracy at this time was closely linked to the idea of rule by the poor, who remained the majority. The party of the poor in power, philosophers, theorists, and religious leaders turned their minds to justifying majoritarianism. The earliest known justification was religious. In the classic fable of democracy, Zeus is said to have given the politicae technae, or the civic arts, to all people, not just to a select few. As with other skills and abilities, the arts necessary for humans to live in community are eidos, a sense of shame, which provides social control on behavior, and dike, a sense of justice. All citizens, from the poorest to the richest, had the innate ability to participate in public debate and to come to reasoned decisions. Popular sovereignty was possible. The philosophical justifications for democracy, found principally in the writings of Aristotle, are based on 3 fundamental notions. 1, the city. 2, the source of knowledge. And 3, what I would term positive citizenship. First of all humans are political or civic animals, possessing logos, reason, and the self-governing city, polis, is where this natural ability is exercised. The association of free and equal humans evolved naturally from family, monarchy, and relations of master and slave. Equality required that the rulers and the ruled be the same. Government was based on consent and meant tapping into the collective logos through a deliberative assembly. The anti-democratic thinkers, led by Socrates and Plato, believed that only the one who knows should rule, and saw the city as a herd needing a shepherd. These philosophers were the first great critics of mob rule. The Greeks believed that knowledge is teachable, which means that there is no exclusive class of persons fit by nature to govern. The first great public teachers were the sophists, who taught the poor and middle class skills previously reserved for the aristocrats, especially logic and rhetoric. Debating skills allowed a person to participate in the assembly and to present an effective case in court. The literacy rate among citizens in Athens is reported to have been extremely high. The term sophistry originates in the anti-democratic party and stems from the prejudice that only the few can possess knowledge. Finally, the Greeks had a positive view of democracy and citizenship. Unlike modern political theory, which focuses on protecting the human from the transgressions of the monarch's state, which I call negative citizenship, the Greeks saw the good of citizenship primarily in the active sense. As I.F. Stone writes, the Athenian and the Greeks generally believed that the citizen was educated and perfected by participating fully in the life and affairs of the city. It followed that to leave government to others was positively immoral. The Socratics and the Christians after them saw something dirty in public life, a notion which survives to this day, but may also be based on our empirical observations of the failings of representative democracy. Direct democracy was implemented empirically in Athens at every level of government, legislative, executive, and the judiciary, something that has never been attempted since. The abuses of majoritarianism were restrained, the Greeks believed, by a common moral and religious code, including some unwritten laws. The classic statement of this is in Pericles' funeral speech. Our form of government does not enter into rivalry with the institutions of others. Our government does not copy our neighbors, but is an example to them. It is true that we are called a democracy, for the administration is in the hands of the many and not of the few. But while there exists equal justice to all and alike in their private disputes, the claim of excellence is also recognized, and when a citizen is in any way distinguished, he is preferred to the public service, not as a matter of privilege, but as the reward of merit. Neither is poverty an obstacle, but a man may benefit his country whatever the obscurity of his condition. There is no exclusiveness in our public life, and in our private business we are not suspicious of one another, nor angry with our neighbor if he does what he likes. We do not put on sour looks at him, which, though harmless, are not pleasant. While we are thus unconstrained in our private business, a spirit of reverence pervades our public acts. We are prevented from doing wrong by respect for the authorities and for the laws, having a particular regard to those which are ordained for the protection of the injured, as well as those unwritten laws, those unwritten nomoi, which bring upon the transgressor of them the reprobation of the general sentiment. Likewise, the founders of American democracy assumed that the enormous potential power of democracy and potential for abuse required that the citizens share a common moral belief system. As John Adams noted, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. The heart of Athenian democracy was the assembly, which in Athens could be attended freely by every citizen. Attendance gave citizens a right to speak, vote, and even to initiate legislation, although all proposals had first to be sent to the boule, which prepared the agenda to future debate. From all accounts, there were no political parties as we know them, and attendance was usually several thousand. One of the cornerstones of the system was the institution of pay for public service. This allowed the poor to exercise their legal rights. As J.V.A. Fine noted, The significance of pay cannot be overemphasized. For the first time in the history of the world, so far as is known, a system was adopted which enabled the poor to participate actively in the work of government. In fact, not just in theory. One of the most original aspects of Athenian constitutional principles is the creation of a mass executive. 500 citizens were selected by lot to the Council of 500, which acted like a cabinet and saw to it that decrees were carried out and prepared the agenda for the assembly. At any one time, 50 councillors from each tribe served as a steering committee, which met daily and appointed a new foreman by lot every day. This person was president for a day and presided over both the boule and the assembly. Although this body may seem cumbersome to us, it illustrates the Athenian commitment to sortition, the lot, or randomness, which is unheard of in representative democracy. This has been called the glue of Athenian democracy. Not only is the lot the only true guarantor of equality, but rotation of citizens randomly to a multitude of administrative posts ensured maximum participation in government and prevented the development of a corporate feeling present in most elected or nominated bodies. The lot also puts loyalty, a democratic virtue, above pride and honor, the primary aristocratic virtues. Election was reserved for those posts where professional knowledge was necessary, such as public works and the military, strategoi. To compensate for the lack of direct decision-making, the people reserved the right to impeach their representatives and put them on trial. Overall, the system ensured a wide distribution of power among the people. As Fine notes, by means of lot, rotation, collegiality, and pay for service, the Athenians achieved what they considered essential for the existence of true democracy, the participation of a large number of citizens beyond their role in the assembly and the law courts in the active work of the magistracies and the boule. When democracy re-emerged as a viable political idea in the 18th century, the conditions were no longer ripe for Greek-style direct democracy. Populations were larger, ethnically diverse, and spread over vast territories. Further, modern democracy emerged out of a radically different context. The struggle was not between aristocrats and the poor, with kingship a distant memory. Rather, imperial monarchies were just passing from the scene, and powerful and distant governments were the real threat to the liberty of the poor, as well as a new middle class. The birth of the American system provides the best example of the issues at stake in creating a modern democracy. For example, to what extent should representation replace direct popular control? The extent to which majoritarianism or direct democracy should be curtailed in the interest of minorities? The dangers of a strong central government, the need for checks and balances, the need for a separation of powers so evidently lacking in the Greek judiciary, the need for a strong judiciary capable of striking down laws. This clash of ideas was embodied in the debate between the anti-federalists and the federalists. The anti-federalists were Athenian-style Democrats, influenced by the writings of Rousseau and Montesquieu. Putting great emphasis on positive citizenship, the anti-federalists believed in civic virtue, that individual fulfillment is achieved by the subordination of private interest to the public good. Civil society was to operate as a teacher and not merely as a regulator. In place of the concept of the city, the anti-federalist idealized the town hall meeting, where communal decisions would be arrived at by deliberation. It followed that they preferred decentralization or states' rights and thought representation should be minimized. As a party of the poor, the anti-federalists approved of debtor relief laws. The federalists, the ultimate victors in the debate, were classic liberals whose ideas present a stark contrast to the Athenian ideal. As conservative aristocrats, they viewed society as a place where individuals pursue private gain, with the state acting as a neutral arbiter of private action. This public-private distinction is characteristic of the negative view of citizenship. To the Federalists, there was no common good, The state must maximize the ability of citizens to find their own good. In order to curb radical democracy, the realm of law, overseen by the judiciary, was to predominate over popular sovereignty. For example, property rights should be protected from debtor relief laws, which no doubt favored the rich. Direct rule by the citizens was logically unmanageable, and representation would water down radical tendencies by filtering and refining public views through the medium of an elected elite. Representation also permits a much larger state, which the Federalists thought reduced the risks of a takeover by a clique. Other anti-democratic instincts were apparent in the fact that the original Constitution did not provide for an elected president, and even today, the candidate with the greatest popular vote can still lose the election. The doctrine of checks and balances and separation of powers further curbed majority control. Tyranny in any form was to be made difficult by setting up structural counterweights. Most important here are bicameralism, the presidential veto, the distribution of powers, and the power of the judiciary to strike down unconstitutional laws. Human rights was another Federalist concern, which reflects modern priorities or prejudices. Madison recognized the dangers of majoritarianism, especially factionalism, and the development of popular tyranny. Pure democracy thought incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. The cornerstone of this liberal philosophy was to be the Bill of Rights, which, although a remarkable achievement, reflects a purely negative conception of citizenship, the shield, not the sword. The emphasis was to be on protecting the individual from the state, rather than on improving the citizen through involvement in self-government. Citizens' democracy, if it is not to degenerate into tyranny, requires its citizens to be governed by a higher moral code, and assumes that humans are fundamentally rational, but are they? This is best expressed in the positive sense in Milton's Areopagitica, an argument against pre-publication licensing and censorship in England. As man is rational, it assumes, there can be a marketplace of ideas if there is no censorship, and truth will always win out in the end, as Milton writes. Where there is much desire to learn, there of necessity will be much arguing, much writing, many opinions. For opinion in good men is but knowledge in the making. And though all the winds of doctrine were let loose to play upon the earth, so truth be in the field, we do injuriously by licensing and prohibiting to misdoubt her strength. Let her in falsehood grapple. Whoever knew truth put to the worse in a free and open encounter. Human rationality posed a problem when the time came for industrial warfare. How to make millions of citizens act against reason, against their interests, and do instead what government required. Or, how do you make a people reject their traditions, their religion, their ancestors, their culture? The answer was propaganda. Humans, it turns out, aren't rational after all. Dehumanize the enemy. Tell people the system is conspiring against them, and it works. The British and then the Germans after them discovered and then refined the principles of propaganda used by governments and political and economic interests to this day. If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it, and you will even come to believe it yourself. A lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. Propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated are confident they are acting on their own free will. There was no point in seeking to convert the intellectuals, for intellectuals would never be converted and would anyway always yield to the stronger, and this will always be the man in the street. Arguments must therefore be crude, clear, and forcible, and appealed to emotions and instincts, not the intellect. Truth was unimportant and entirely subordinate to tactics and psychology. Propaganda must facilitate the displacement of aggression by specifying the targets for hatred. A media system wants ostensible diversity that conceals an actual uniformity. The English follow the principle that when one lies, it should be a big lie, and one should stick to it. Let me control the textbooks, and I will control the state.
There's no dialogue. There's no possibility of talking between the groups. It's just a power stage where combat has to take place. And so the reason that speakers with whom the radical post-modernists
the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it?
The principles of propaganda can be seen actively at work in all the political issues of our time, making rational deliberation and decision impossible. It's power that matters now. Inspired by Marxist ideology, many reject common morality or laws, traditions, and reason itself, the cornerstone of democracy. As the Athenians saw it, can democracy survive? We will see. Till next time, fellow citizens and patriots.